The story begins with information that in 2010 in Paris, to deal with increasingly rampant crime, the government finally built isolation walls in areas considered prone to crime. One of the most vulnerable areas is B13 or District 13, which has been surrounded by high walls and wires. There is no education or proper facilities for residents in it. The police don't protect the area either, only guarding the borders to ensure that no one passing District's 13 border. Now the sale and distribution of illegal drugs in District 13 is rampant. It is controlled by gangster groups. Blocks within District 13 are also controlled by gang leaders, including an apartment controlled by a man named Lito. Lito is a man who hates drugs and hates injustice. One day, the gang next door, led by Taha, ordered his thugs, led by K2, come to the apartment where Lito was. Two guards outside the apartment immediately pointed guns, but K2 said that he only came to meet Lito. The two guards also reasoned that their boss was not there. But K2 tried to familiarize himself with the guards, also informed that he didn't carry a weapon, but when the opportunity arose, K2 immediately killed them. As it turns out, Lito had taken 20 kilograms of drugs worth millions of dollars belonging to Taha's gang. Now Taha's thugs are hunting Lito in his apartment. Lito, who was in his 10th floor residence, immediately destroyed the 20 kilograms of drugs with bleach because he knew that he would soon be raided. Meanwhile, K2 and his thugs had reached the 10th floor. They killed two guards there and got information on where Lito's unit was. They were ordered by the boss Taha to take Lito alive. Then when they want to break into his unit, Lito suddenly came out and ran away. Skillfully, Lito, who is indeed a parkour expert, continues to escape from the pursuit of Taha's thugs. At the same time, he killed several of them. Lito continued to jump from one building to another. Eventually, the thugs couldn't catch up with him because Lito jumped all the way to the opposite building. Taha was very angry because they couldn't catch Lito, especially since 20 kilograms of drugs had been destroyed. K2 also reasoned that Lito was so agile and it was very difficult to catch him. Then Taha asked them to give ideas to catch Lito. Without further ado, one by one his men were immediately killed until someone could give a brilliant idea. K2, who wanted to be killed, immediately conveyed his idea. That is by kidnapping Lito's sister named Lola, who worked in the shop. Hearing the idea, Taha agreed and immediately ordered them to arrest Lola. It didn't take long. At that moment, Lola was immediately dragged by two from her workplace. She was taken to Taha's place. It seems so many of his men, the guard is also so tight, and there is a drug laboratory room. After passing through a room full of gang members, and Lola was teased by the gang members. K2 will also take the elevator, which is also heavily guarded, to take Lola to meet the boss Taha upstairs. But it turns out that Lito has been watching the movements of the two and saw his kidnapped sister from the top of the building. Right when the two boarded the elevator, Lito immediately entered Taha's room by breaking the window and then putting a knife to Taha's neck. In order to save Taha's life, Lito asked for two things. First, never disturb his residence and no more dealers within a 500-meter radius of his place. Second, Lola must be released and Taha must help him. Taha complied with Lito's request. Meanwhile, Lola could grab two pistols and told him to get down. While continuing to point the gun, slowly, Lito took Taha out of there and fled by car. Lito took Taha to the police post at the district border and asked to see the inspector in charge. Just then, K2 and his gang caught up with him. There, Lito meets the inspector, who tells him that Taha is a big drug dealer and shows him some evidence of the drugs he sells. Lito hopes that the police can put Taha in jail. The inspector and his police friends can't do anything because the French government will eliminate the police station there. There will only be regular border guards. They were also afraid that Taha's gang would outnumber the police 3 times over. As a result, Lito was put in a cell. Meanwhile, Taha was released. The inspector told Lito that the government was planning to blow up the entire District 13 to clear it of all criminals. Even though there were innocent citizens, with a happy smile, Taha made Lola faint and took her away. Meanwhile, Lito is furious that his sister has been kidnapped and the police are unreliable. Finally, he brutally kills the inspector. 6 months later, outside the affluent B13 neighborhood, a mobster named Carlos was with his 2 men, Benito and Pedro. They had just arrived at Carlos' illegal casino, which was hidden in the basement of a supermarket. There were many people gambling there. Then Carlos and his men went into the cash storage room to check the situation. One of his men reported an irregularity, that there were 2 policemen who had been in the supermarket for too long. In addition, a group of special police were seen ready to storm and raid the casino. Carlos was surprised to see it, and he concluded that one of his men was an undercover cop. Because Pedro is a new member, Carlos, who was suspicious of Pedro, immediately killed him. But it turns out that Benito is an undercover cop for months. His real name is Damien, a police captain who has ordered a raid to arrest Carlos for making illicit transactions. Everyone in the room was ordered to leave except Carlos. After that, Damien's men began the action to get Carlos out of there. Carlos' men kept shooting at the door and want to break it down. Meanwhile, Carlos was caught by the police on top of the building and a rope was lowered to save Damien. However, the door was already broken down, and for a while, Damien hid behind the door. Then all the enemies were eliminated with his above-average martial arts skills. Damien, who came out of the storage room, continued to kill one enemy after another with epically skill, and the situation was completely safe. The casino raid and Carlos' arrest were a huge success. Carlos could only curse Damien, who had been considered his own brother. After the mission, Damien was congratulated by his superior Colonel Patrick and given an emergency mission. Damien was introduced to the Secretary of National Defense, Mr. Kruger, and his assistant, Corsini. Kruger begins to explain the difficult emergency mission and tells the story of how it all began. That afternoon, when the country wanted to deliver an item by armored car, suddenly a group of small children came pretending to be beggars cleaning the car. But actually, they just wanted to cover the driver's view with soap and then put a bomb in the door and kill the driver. It turned out to be Taha's gang, who thought there were valuables in the car. But the contents were a high explosive bomb with a radius of 8 km that turned on automatically when the suitcase was opened and would explode within 24 hours. Kruger was certain that the bomb would be sold or moved elsewhere by Taha's gang and that it could lead to mass murder. Therefore, Damien was ordered to defuse the bomb before the explosion occurred. Damien declined the mission, however, as the time was too short. He had to study the battlefield for weeks first. Plus, District 13 was the most terrifying area full of gangsters. Colonel Patrick also said that this was an order, not an offer. Kruger also added that Damien will be accompanied by a man who knows the shortcut of District 13. Who else if not Leto? But because Leto is now in prison, Damien must find the fastest way to convince Leto to cooperate and join this mission. That day, Leto will be transferred to another prison as ordered. Meanwhile, Damien was also put into the car to be taken to the same prison. The police and wardens there had no idea that Damien was the captain in disguise, so that his mission to take Leto away wouldn't violate the law, because Leto should still be in prison for killing the inspector. While on the way to another prison, Damien, who already had a clip in his mouth, easily opened the handcuffs. Then Damien told Leto that he had to escape from the car to take revenge on the gang leader named Taha in District 13. The reason was that Taha had killed 3 of his family members. In addition, Damien also told him that Taha had a woman named Lola who was always given drugs and also tied up like a dog. This made Leto even angrier to hear it. After that, Damien could open the back door with his clip, and it only took a few seconds to take over the car. Leto, who also could open his handcuffs, moved to the front seat. Meanwhile, Colonel Patrick's men reported that Leto and Damien had managed to escape from prison. Suspicious of Damien, Leto handcuffed his hands to the steering wheel and ordered Damien to break through the heavily guarded border. Because the car was shot and the tires exploded, Damien couldn't control his car and ended up crashing into a luxury car belonging to the leader of a gang. It turned out that Leto had realized that Damien was an undercover cop and didn't care what his mission was to come to District 13. Leto just left him because he had to save his sister, Lola. Leto also doesn't trust the police anymore. Meanwhile, Damien must fight with the gang while still handcuffed. At the Taha gang place, Lola is seen kneeling at Taha's feet and is very weak because she continues to be injected with drugs every day. Shortly thereafter, K2 came to give the news that Leto escaped from prison an hour ago, and soon he would be heading to the headquarters to save his brother. From afar, Leto was monitoring Taha. Then Damien came and immediately handcuffed his hands in retaliation for his actions earlier. It turned out that Leto could tell Damien was a cop from the way he moved and fought, which was too neat. Not like the street fighters there. They also had an argument. Leto thought Damien was just like most policemen who just obeyed the orders of superiors. Meanwhile, Damien felt that Leto was nothing more than a criminal thug who did not obey the law and couldn't be cooperated with. Then Damien told him the real mission. That in District 13 there is a bomb that will explode in 2 hours. It could wipe out the entire population there, even innocent ones. Therefore, Damien wanted to invite Leto to work together, because they had the same target, that is Taha. Leto could get his sister, while Damien could defuse the bomb. Leto finally agreed, but if Damien lied or dared to betray, then Leto will immediately kill him. After that, Damien plans to sneak in and defuse the bomb. Only then do they look for Lola, but Leto is silent. He borrowed Damien's phone, which he kept in his shoe, without discussing it with Damien first. Leto immediately called Taha. Then, easily, Leto said that he was at the factory near Taha's place, and was with a policeman who wanted to make a deal with him. Damien was angry because they should have infiltrated secretly, but Leto said that in District 13 they couldn't do that anymore. After all, Leto also knows Taha very well and asks Damien to believe in his plan. That is just used Taha's curiosity and let them come up. Not long after, K2 and his men arrived on Taha's orders, who immediately took them into their place to meet the big boss. Meanwhile, at the headquarters, Taha met someone with a big body to be given a job. When meeting Taha, Damien said that a bomb explosion could kill 2 million people, and he could defuse it with a code that would be sent. But Taha just laughs, because the bomb will be sent to explode somewhere. Taha allows Damien to defuse it as long as there is a monetary reward totaling 20 million euros. Damien agreed and asked for an account number to transfer the money to. In the end, he was given Taha's account number, which was in the State Bank of the Bahamas, so as not to be easily traced. Then, Damien also wanted to see where the bomb was. Taha happily invited them both to look through binoculars. It turns out that the bomb has been fitted with a Russian launcher that is targeted to fall right into the center of Paris. In addition, Lola is also chained near the bomb. Damien also called the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Kruger, and told him that Taha was asking for 20 million euros if he wanted the bomb back. Obviously, Kruger said that the state couldn't provide that much money, and asked Damien to find another way. However, Damien tried to keep calm. He pretended that the money had already been transferred to Taha's account in the Bahamas. Damien then excused himself to defuse the bomb, but Taha immediately put him on hold, because he had to make sure the money was actually in the account. His men were asked to call acquaintances in the Bahamas, but fortunately the bank there was only open for half an hour. Finally, Leto and Damien were asked to wait in the next room until there was certainty that the 20 million had entered the account. They were told to kneel while facing the wall and were constantly watched by K2's men. Leto and Damien whispered about their next move. Leto felt strange about the government for not trying to negotiate further, even though this concerns millions of human lives. Then Leto told his idea, where it turned out that he had dug a tunnel that penetrated into the toilet there, which was in the hallway leading to the elevator. In the past, Leto made a secret tunnel so that he could monitor the movements of Taha's gangsters at any time, and they could use the tunnel to escape from there. Just then, Damien told one of the men to take them to Taha's room, as there was something to discuss. As soon as they passed through the hallway to the elevator, right at the intersection to the toilet, Leto and Damien immediately escaped to the tunnel, of course in an acrobatic way. Taha, who was furious that the two of them could escape, finally shot dead a guard who was responsible. Taha was even more angry because it turned out that Damien was lying and there was no transfer into a bank account in the Bahamas. But not only that, Taha's men said that all of Taha's money in banks in various countries was gone. Taha's men were convinced by the Bahamas account number that had been given earlier. Somehow other bank accounts were also drained by the government. The higher-ups of Taha's gang began to doubt, because now their boss was bankrupt and had no value in their eyes. Taha tried to convince them that he still had plenty of cash in the safe. But none of them believed him, not even K2 himself wanted to give his gun to Taha. Until finally they killed their own boss. Lido and Damien could get out in the culvert, but Taha's men were still chasing them, and they continued to dodge every attack by doing parkour. Lido and Damien, who were reunited, continued towards the building with the bomb on it, but unfortunately, they were surrounded when they were under the building. Not long after, K2 arrived, but instead of killing them both, K2 asked Lido and Damien to defuse the bomb for the good of all District 13 residents. In 10 minutes, the bomb would explode. They rushed to the rooftop of the building, but the big man was still there. Damien's kicks couldn't make the big man budge. The concrete blocks were also easily destroyed by him. In fact, the big man's slap was so strong that it split a concrete pillar. It was clear that Damien's strength wasn't equal to him, and Lido immediately helped by tying many ropes on the big man's body, until he couldn't move at all, and then Damien made his final attack. At the same time, Lola, who was already conscious and still in a state of intoxication, was also chained. She decided to kill herself rather than be tortured continuously. Lola poured the gasoline that was there, then lit a match and threw it. But what happened was that the match was caught. Lido came to save his sister. Meanwhile, Damien continues to look for a signal, so he can call Kruger and ask for the code to deactivate the bomb. After that, Kruger told him the code, which was 9,293,709.13. However, when Damien wants to enter the code, Lido immediately stops him, because the code feels very odd. 9293 is the zone number of the region, 709 is the date of the day, while B13 is the name of the district. According to Lido, the bomb was intended to blow up the entire District 13, because all the numbers of the code match District 13. However, Damien considers it all just a coincidence, and as a soldier, he must complete his duties. Lido also concluded that it could be that the code wasn't to defuse. Instead, it makes the bomb explode, and this is all just a trap. They ended up with fighting. Damien had entered the code until the letter B, and Lido immediately attacked him. A fight ensues from where they were originally working together. Now they had to attack each other because of different visions. With less than 2 minutes to go, Damien could hit the number 1, and the last number left was 3 to finish. However, Lido continued to attack Damien, and took him to a farther place. Lido tried to make his friend realize that perhaps this was the purpose of the government building the wall around District 13, which was to clear the entire area by blowing it up. In addition, Kruger must have made up the story that the armored car was attacked, because they clearly saw the car at Taha's base, which was fine. That means Kruger knew that the bomb delivery would definitely be sniffed out by Taha's gang, and would be launched into the city center. That's why Kruger ordered Damien to be sacrificed and scapegoated for the success of the detonation mission. 1 more minute and the bomb will explode, but Damien is still adamant about his opinion. He kept trying to dial the last code number, until finally, right when Damien wanted to press the number 3, Lola, who was fully awake, helped her brother restrain Damien. It turned out that Lido's theory was right. It was precisely the code that could detonate the bomb. The 3 of them went downstairs while carrying the suitcase containing the bomb. K2 was also happy because the taming mission was successful. Then they were released as a thank you. Meanwhile, at the National Defense Office, Kruger is nervous because the bomb still hasn't exploded. Then suddenly, there was the sound of a fight outside, and it was Lido and Damien who entered Kruger's room while carrying the bomb suitcase. Damien calmly pressed it until the number B13 remained. Kruger immediately stopped him because it could blow up the city of Paris. This is where Kruger explains that District 13 is out of control, the cost burden is huge for the country, and it is the French taxpayers who bear all the costs of 2 million citizens in B13. Therefore, the easiest way to solve the problem is to blow up District 13, because it is impossible for the government to carry out a convoluted and ineffective democratic method. Because the entire population of the 13th district is just considered garbage. Hearing that, Damien finally pressed the code to completion, and Kruger immediately screamed in panic. But it turned out that it was just Damien's prank. They both just smiled, because it turned out that all of Kruger's words had just been recorded and broadcast to all TV channels, so that the entire French population knows how rotten the government are, especially Kruger, who is responsible. That what they did was so arbitrary and inhumane. After the dangerous mission and unmasking the rottenness of the government and Kruger, the public respects and supports what Lido and Damien are doing. Next week, the entire wall of District 13 will be torn down. In addition, police stations, post offices, schools, and others will also be opened next month, which Lido is trusted to oversee. Damien had also offered Lido to live outside of District 13, but Lido refused. That is because District 13 was his birthplace. He wants to live in peace there. Lido and Damien finally separated. Then suddenly Lola kissed Damien as a farewell and invited Damien to stop by their house in District 13 often. After that, the movie ended. The sequel story begins 3 years after Lido and Damien could save District 13, where the government promised to tear down the walls of District 13, but until now it has not been done. Facilities are still inadequate and education is non-existent. Crime and gangs are still rampant. Laws don't apply, illegal drugs are still traded, and the police only guard the borders of District 13. Meanwhile, our main actor Lido, one of the clean, fair, and respected gangster leaders of District 13, he finally starts blowing up the walls of the district. That is because he is fed up with the government's sweetheart attitude and promises, and wants the residents of District 13 to have the same rights as the rest of France people. Soon, the police caught him in the act, and as usual, Lido escaped the police with his parkour skills. Lido took refuge in a group of African gangsters led by Molko. Molko ordered his men to drive away the arriving police. Meanwhile, Lido was talked to one-on-one. Molko said that Lido had to stop his action of blowing up the walls of District 13 because according to Molko, the walls protected them like a fortress, and the residents in it were free to do anything. It's different view with Lido, who considers District 13 like a cage. Its residents are considered like garbage that must be destroyed, and the government has also forgotten its promises. After that, shown how drug transactions are carried out from the inside to the outside of District 13, where a pickup caravan pretends to deliver watermelons, when in fact there are bags of drugs inside. After the drug package arrived, his aide also reported it to the boss named Wu, who owns a club place with many comfort women in it, which is actually just a front cover for his drug trade. Wu, who had been watching a woman of the night, asked the other women to leave, so that he can be alone with the woman he wants. But it turned out that the woman pulled out a gun from her thigh. He is Lido's accidental partner in the first movie, Damien Tommaso, a police captain who also upholds justice, and as always, he mostly goes undercover for months to study the target area before catching his target. After Wu was tied up, Damien drugged Wu's aide, also luring one by one the drug dealer's clients into the room. Then they were all knocked unconscious down too. Now Wu was the seller and all the dealers were in the room. Damien immediately ordered his police colleagues, who were waiting outside, to immediately come to raid. As soon as the police arrived, the guards immediately pressed the emergency button, which automatically closed the entrance with an iron fence. However, Damien, who already knew detail of the location, was already aware of it. The police outside had brought a towing hook. Damien also knew that there was a secret hole right under Wu's chair. Because Wu didn't want to tell the code, without further ado, Damien immediately blew up the hole with a grenade, and one by one people were put into the hole. The special police force were waiting right underneath. The police outside couldn't get in that easily, because it turned out that there was still a second layer of iron doors that were sturdier, and there was also a lot of gas coming out. They tried to stop the gas with a nearby stop faucet, but it turned out to be a trap that made an explosion, and several policemen were injured. Meanwhile, Damien himself is also in danger, because the original Van Gogh painting that was stolen by Wu and will be saved does not fit into the hole. Soon Wu's men could break down the door, and Damien finishes them all off one by one, while keeping the painting from getting scuffed and damaged. All the enemies in the room were defeated, but since Wu's men were still shooting outside, Damien escaped through a small opening towards the kitchen. Inside there was a hidden drug lab, and one of them set off a bomb that would explode in 3 minutes to eliminate all evidence of drugs there. While fighting the lab officers, Damien reported to his police colleagues that there was a bomb and asked for any help that could be given to defuse it. In the end, the police sent a big hunk of metal, just when all the enemies are defeated and a detonation time is 12 seconds left. On the other hand, the police cut a hole in the metal door and could unlock the opening code with a tool. Damien had single-handedly eliminated them all, and Van Gogh's painting was also saved. On Damien's return to the apartment, he's greeted by his wife, and it's clear they're having romantic action right away. Elsewhere, 3 teenagers, one of whom is named Samir, is chatting with his girlfriend Sefia through text messages and song requests on the radio. So their cars are in close proximity. Samir and his friends are on the dark street behind, while Sefia and her friend are in the middle of the supermarket parking lot. Meanwhile, 2 policemen were on patrol, suddenly got an order to check the white car in the supermarket, which was Sefia's car. The 2 policemen were confused because they were just ordinary teenagers. Sefia and her friend were also confused why the police suddenly came. Until finally, a black car broke the CCTV near the supermarket, then came to Sefia's car. They looked like a special forces unit and found it strange. Samir and the gang recorded and filmed the whole incident from his car. The leader of the team, let's call him Baldy, then immediately drove Sefia out of there. When it was quiet, the 2 policemen were asked to return to their car, and suddenly they were killed. It was very, very suspicious what the gang leader, Baldy, and his friends were doing. The 2 policemen were killed just like that. Then the police car was also put into a truck. The police car was taken out right in front of a group of gangs, and from afar, the team leader, Baldy, deliberately opened fire, so that the gang thought it was the police in the car who were shooting. The provoked action worked. The gangs returned fire brutally, and the whole incident was recorded by the team leader, the bald one. At that time, Lido was exercising nearby. Hearing the gunshots, he peered into the distance and saw the license plate of the team leader's car, Baldy, with DSF written on it. The next morning, the same Special Forces unit, DIS, led this time by the assault squad leader, let's call him the Beard, raided Damien's apartment. Damien was arrested on suspicion of drug possession, and one of the members suddenly found the drugs in the kitchen. Damien knew this must be a trap, and that the drugs must have been brought by the bearded member from the beginning. But he couldn't do anything about it, because the ambush was so suddenly. Meanwhile, at the Elysee Palace, or the French Presidential Palace, Mr. President, played by Philip Torton, saw the video footage of the team leader, Baldy, in which the District 13 gang was seen killing 2 policemen. The president's aide said that, in his observations so far, District 13 gangs couldn't behave that brutally without a reason. Therefore, the president asked the 5-star general to assign Damien to investigate this case, because he was very smart and worked efficiently. The general agreed. Unfortunately, he informed that Damien had already been jailed that morning for drug possession. The next person recommended was Walter Gassman, the chairman of the DIS. The president asked Gassman to investigate the case and not let the video go public, because it could make a civil war. The president wanted the case to be resolved as soon as possible while he was attending state meetings for the next 2 days. He secretly ordered his men to spread the video over the internet, because he thought war wasn't always bad for democracy. In no time, the video of the brutality of the 3 District 13 gang members spread. It even made it onto TV and other news. One of the policemen at the border post became angry when he saw the news. In the end, he shot a gang member who was being held there, and it made the situation even more worse. Meanwhile, Damien, who was in prison and wanted to be put in a cell, finally fought the 2 policemen who took him. The police took the phone to inform Lito via voice message that Damien was in jail because he was framed and needed his help. It is likely that in 2 hours he will be dumped in the middle of nowhere. Meanwhile, at his secret headquarters, Gassman was told by the team leader, the bald man, about the CCTV footage, which when zoomed in clearly shows Samir and his friends recording a video of the police shooting. At that moment, the DIS troops were looking for their location. 2 of Samir's friends have been arrested. Meanwhile, Samir, who could escape, turned out to be well acquainted with Lito. Because he was so panicked, Samir only said that if the police car case was just a trap, he had recorded the original incident. But he didn't have time to copy it. The file was given to Lito, and soon Samir was caught by DIS's troops. Feeling that there were serious irregularities, Lito returned to his apartment, and just in case, he installed a thin wire connected to the music player so he could notice and find out that an enemy was coming. Gassman was informed by his subordinates that Damien was calling Lito, which would be difficult to catch because Lito was so agile. In his apartment, after seeing the video file from Samir, Lito also heard incoming voice messages and knew his best friend Damien was asking for help. At the same time, the ringleaders, the team leader, the bald man, and the beard, along with DIS's troops, arrived. The guard outside the apartment was immediately killed. Then, when they were looking for Lito's position, the wire that had been installed was nudged, and then Lito immediately could escape with his parkour skills. Gassman was furious because 3 units of troops were unable to catch Lito. Meanwhile, Malko avenged the death of his men who were killed by the police, then burning down the police post at the border. Lito finally arrived at the police station where Damien was imprisoned, and without further ado, he immediately complained to the chief of police there, so that he can be put in a cell. Then when taken to the cell, Lito quickly tricked the police. He opened the handcuffs and took the keys, and passed through the iron fence from the ceiling. Lito finally gets to Damien's cell, and the 2 friends finally work together again after all this time. Now comes the hard part, that is getting out of the place, and of course, more enemies to fight. After beating up the cops who arrived, they broke the elevator system and entered the hole, then climbed up the cable to the top. Meanwhile, at the presidential palace, the president canceled his attendance to an important meeting between countries because the riots were getting worse in District 13. The officials there also said that the situation was in danger, and in the next few hours other districts might join District 13, which could trigger a civil war. The president asked Gassman for a recommended solution, and Gassman's opinion was to evacuate the residents of District 13 in 12 hours, then blow up the whole of District 13, which was still full of gangsters and dealers. That way, the whole community could be calmer. District 13 could be rebuilt for the middle class, and many new jobs would be created. At first, the president refused because the people must be protected, and the government also upholds the values of freedom, equality, and law. But Gassman tried to convince them that although his idea was extreme and against the values of the state, but it was the best way to go within 12 hours, as the situation was already out of control. The president began to hesitate, and finally decided to evacuate all residents of District 13 without exception first. As for blowing up the district, he will think again and decide tomorrow. It turns out that Lito and Damien are hiding in the air vent until the situation subsides and calmed down. At that time, Damien told Lito that he was slandered for having drugs and was finally arrested. Lito believes that Damien was slandered because corrupt government elements want to get rid of honest policemen like Damien so that their plans run smoothly. After that, Lito told him about the video of the shooting of 2 policemen who were killed by a group of people with DIS license plates, as well as the District 13 gang who were framed as the culprits. Damien was surprised to hear that because DIS was the internal security department. Damien knew that DIS only wanted to obey their leader, that is Gassman. Therefore, they need strong evidence that Gassman is really involved with this case, and plan to enter his office to look for clues. When there were many people, they walked normally so as not to be suspected. However, one of the members realized Then they were no choice to fight the enemy one by one until finally in a besieged position. Damien asked Leto to focus on finding clues to Gassman's involvement. Meanwhile, he would face all the enemies alone to buying time. When he entered Gassman's room, his assistant there could only remain silent in fear. Leto tried to steal Gassman's important data, but because the computer was shut down, Leto would look for the connection, until finally he found a hard drive containing Gassman's important data. After successfully getting the hard drive, Leto and Damien immediately escaped from there by jumping out of the window. Gassman, who was still at the State Palace, was even more angry because Leto came to save Damien and also damaged his office. The residents were being evacuated by the army. Leto takes Damien to the place of the tech expert gangsters led by Tao. Obviously, the goal is to open Gassman's files, and they also know Gassman's goal of destroying the 5 central buildings of District 13. Later, the District 13 area will be rebuilt for business purposes. Meanwhile, 3 helicopters arrive to install laser markers on the rooftops of each building, to make it easier for fighter planes that will launch missiles tomorrow morning. Leto and the others know the location of the helicopter, and Damien says that only Mr. President has the right to issue the missile order. Therefore, Damien invites Teo to work together to stop the mass detonation for the sake of the lives of 2 million people in District 13 and also for justice. The next step is to enlist the help of 4 other gangster leaders who have their own expertise with their leaders. They were Molko, Ali K, Little Montana, and Carl Skinhead. Tao began to brief them that tomorrow, District 13 would be destroyed, and they were asked to work together to stop it. After all heard it, they all agreed. After that, Damien explained his plan. Firstly, the entire population had to be evacuated without exception. And secondly, Damien needed 30 of the best people from their respective groups to sneak into the State Palace secretly, without using weapons, and take over the center of operations. The next morning, the president arrived at Elysee Palace and asked for an update on the evacuation. The general said that almost everyone had been evacuated, but there were several thousand people still there due to the difficulty of access and the many gangsters sniping from the building. Because there were still so many people left there, the president asked for the evacuation to continue. However, the general said that there was no more time, and the suitcase for the missile launch order was immediately prepared, where the president simply entered the second key and then pressed the red button as a sign of the missile launch order. On the other hand, 30 of the best men from each of the ruling gangs had begun to climb the presidential palace, and they all began to beat up all the guards outside and in the lobby. Undecided, the president took the order key and asked the general to find another solution. However, Gassman tried to incite that the people of District 13 were people who had no respect for the law. They also liked to kill and steal at will. Gassman thinks the people there are pests that must be exterminated. Moreover, they have existed for many years and will not be resolved by dialogue, but only by exterminating them. Moreover, the state will benefit because the people of the district have been a burden on the state. If the place is destroyed along with the gangsters who are still in it, then development can be directed to the right purpose. The economy would improve, people's purchasing power would increase, and crime would go on. After listening to Gassman, the president asked the general to confirm one last time that there were no civilians in District 13 using the thermal sensors of the soldiers' helicopters. Gassman, who received reports of unrest downstairs, ordered the team leader, Baldy, to deal with the problem. However, the soldiers who kept arriving were no match for the brutality of the gangsters and their leader. Even the team leader, Baldy, who seemed strong and tough, to be down only with one kick away. Shortly afterward, the general reported that all civilians had been evacuated, but in fact had not all out yet. It was clear that the general was also in cahoots with Gassman. Just as the president inserted the key, Leto, Damien, and the rest of the gangsters arrived. The 5-star general was immediately kicked by Molko. Then, Leto and Damien showed the original footage of what the dismembers had done, that they were actually the masterminds of this worst. The 2 policemen were killed to create a riot, then District 13 would be destroyed and rebuilt by a contractor of Gassman's acquaintance. Gassman would get a very, very large commission from the project. All the evidence was on Gassman's hard drive about his involvement with the contractor. Hearing that, Gassman was desperate to point a gun at the president and force him to insert the key, as well as press the red button to launch the missile immediately. The situation was so tense that Leto finally tried to divert attention. After Gassman was successfully silenced, one by one, the leaders of gang beat him up and then put Gassman on the carpet. The president thanked them all, and the state owed them. The president promised to spend a lot of money, specifically for District 13, and make District 13 have dignity and also a proper place in society. However, Leto had a different opinion. Leto argued that rather than fixing what was already broken, it would be better to destroy the entire District 13 and start from scratch, because then it would be much easier to form a new neighborhood with new jobs and supportive facilities. The Mr. President agreed with Leto's opinion and appointed Damien as the head of the new construction project, who would hopefully not be involved in corruption like Gassman. The other gang leaders also agreed in the name of solidarity and for the good of all their lives. In the end, Mr. President inserted his key and pressed all 5 red buttons on the suitcase. The boom of the missile reached them. To celebrate their new consistent mission, the president and the gangsters smoke together and talk about everything. With their time together, the sequel story ended.